Shalom, I'm Rabbi Jonathan Ginsburg of the Ezra Habonim Niles Township Jewish Congregation. This video is going to attempt to explain what the Jewish conception of the Messiah is. First of all, Maimonides, the great medieval rabbi from 1135 to 1204, gave us our 13 principles of faith. And these are not creed that all Jews are required to believe, but he delineated them, and this is a representative idea about Judaism. And in a very famous principle of his faith that he says Jews believe, he said that he believes with perfect faith in the coming of the Messiah. Though the Messiah tarry, he still believes. Now, Jews can be described as cautiously optimistic. In fact, it's said that if you're planting a tree and someone tells you the Messiah is here, you should finish planting the tree and then go see, because you know for sure that the Messiah, that the tree will do some good. You're not so sure the Messiah will actually be here. In fact, every single time someone has said to us that the Messiah is here, we have found it to be false. We certainly don't believe that Jesus was God or that Jesus was the forerunner of the Messiah. The world is still as terrible, and if the Messiah came, the world shouldn't be that way. We've also had many false messiahs, Jacob, Frank, and Shabtai Tzvi in the late Middle Ages. Currently, we have two groups of Hasidic Jews who claim their dead rabbi is the Messiah. My relatives, the Bratzlavers, believe their dead rabbi from 200 years ago. Certainly many, if not all, of Lubavitch Hasidim believe that their dead rabbi is the Messiah. Most Jews simply reject that idea. In fact, we're very nervous about suggesting that any particular person is the Messiah. When Rabbi Akiva 2,000 years ago embraced Bar Koziba, whose name he changed to Bar Kokhba, as the Messiah, and he led a rebellion against Rome, it led to terrible devastation. We instead prefer to think about the Messianic Era. In fact, the great holiday of Passover has an interesting piece of the Seder celebration when we open the door for Elijah. Now, Elijah, in Jewish tradition, is the person who's supposed to tell us when the Messiah is here. In fact, the section of the Bible, the prophets, ends with the prophet Malachi saying that God will send Elijah the prophet to announce the great and awesome day of the Lord. Now, what will that day be? What will happen in that day? Well, there are many views, but I want to share with you the view of Maimonides. And he basically says that we should not speculate about when this will happen. We shouldn't even speculate about how it will happen, whether we have to do something or God will simply bring it. And he says all of the biblical allusions that a wolf and a lamb will lie down together are simply figurative, metaphors. There's an old joke about the biblical zoo with all the representative animals of the Bible, and they have the Messianic cage with a wolf and a lamb in it, although they have to replace the lamb each day. Until the Messiah comes, sadly, that'll be the view. Now, there are some rabbis who thought that literally wolves and lambs will lie down together in the Messianic era. But again, Maimonides thought it was figurative, because the Bible says that in the Messianic age, every person will sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one will make them afraid, and that nation will not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Maimonides says in his book, The Mishnah Torah, the only difference between the present world and the Messianic era is our present subjugation to foreign powers. So we will be free, as will all people. And then he says, the prophets and the sages longed for the Messianic days, not in order to dominate the nations of the world, nor to rule over them, nor to be exalted by them, nor to eat and drink and rejoice, but to be free to study Torah, with no one to oppose or distress them. So basically, for Maimonides, it was a holy spiritual time of relaxation and be able to worship unhindered and to draw closer to God in that way. Now, how can you tell if somebody really is the Messiah? Maimonides, in this code of law, says the following. If a king arises from the house of David, so it has to come from the house of David, a student of Torah, performing good deeds like his ancestor David, and prevails upon Israel to reinstate the Torah and to follow its direction, and he fights the battles of the Lord, he presumably will be the Messiah. Now, if he does these things and rebuilt the sanctuary, the third temple, on its site, and gather the dispersed of Israel, he will certainly be the Messiah. Now, no one so far has done those things, and so we don't have the Messiah yet. Now, some Jews, of course, don't believe it literally, and they believe it's really going to be an era of peace. That when the nations of the world can finally achieve peace with one another, that will be the Messianic era. Whichever belief you subscribe to, the most important thing is that we all live as if the Messiah were already here. Because if we all live as if the Messiah were already here, then in effect it would be. That's why we come back to the central verse of the Torah, that we have to love our neighbor as ourselves. Enough with the killing. Enough with thinking you have to murder innocent people in the greater glory of God. Let's live in peace. Israel just wants to be in peace with its neighbors. Let's live in peace and pray for the coming of the Messiah.